Hello, this is Chapter 4 from Quotations from Mao Tse Tung, otherwise known as Mao's Little Red Book. I proceed. Chapter 4. The correct handling of contradictions among the people. Quotation 1. Two types of social contradictions, those between ourselves and the enemy, and those among the people themselves, confront us. The two are totally different in their nature. Second quotation. To understand these two different types of contradictions correctly, we must first be clear on what is meant by the people and what is meant by the enemy. At the present stage, the period of building socialism, the classes, strata, and social groups will favor, support, and work for the cause of socialist construction all come within the category of the people, while the social forces and groups which resist the socialist revolution and are hostile to or sabotage socialist construction are all enemies of the people. Third quotation. In the conditions prevailing in China today, the contradictions among the people comprise the contradictions within the working class, the contradictions within the peasantry, the contradictions within the intelligentsia, the contradictions between the working class and the peasantry, the contradictions between the workers and the peasants on the one hand and the intellectuals on the other, the contradictions between the working class and other sections of the working people on the one hand and the national bourgeoisie on the other, the contradictions within the national bourgeoisie, and so on. Our people's government is one that genuinely represents the people's interests. It is a government that serves the people. Nevertheless, there are still certain conditions between the government and the people. These include contradictions among the interests of the state, the interests of the collective, and the interests of the individual, between democracy and centralism, between the leadership and the led, and the contradiction arising from the bureaucratic style of work of certain government workers in their relations with the masses. All these are also contradictions among the people. Generally speaking, the people's basic identity of interests underlies the contradictions among the people. The next quotation. The contradictions between the enemy and us are antagonistic contradictions. Within the ranks of the people, the contradictions among the working people are all non-antagonistic, while those between the exploited and the exploiting classes have a non-antagonistic aspect in addition to an antagonistic aspect. Next quotation. In the political life of our people, how should right be distinguished from wrong in one's words and actions on the basis of principles of our Constitution, the will of the overwhelming majority of our people, and the common political positions which have been proclaimed on various occasions by our political parties and groups? We consider that, broadly speaking, the criteria should be as follows. 1. Words and actions should help to unite, not to divide, the people of our various nationalities. 2. They should be beneficial and not harmful to socialist transformation and socialist construction. 3. They should help to consolidate and not undermine or weaken the people's democratic dictatorship. 4. They should help to consolidate and not undermine or weaken democratic centralism. 5. They should help to strengthen and not discard or weaken the leadership of the Communist Party. 6. They should be beneficial and not harmful to international socialist unity and the unity of the peace-loving people of the world. Of these 6 criteria, the most important are the socialist path and the leadership of the party. Next quotation. The question of suppressing counter-revolutionaries is one of a struggle between us and the enemy, a contradiction between us and the enemy. Among the people, some see the question in a somewhat different light. Two kinds of persons hold views different from ours. Those with a rightist way of thinking make no distinction between the enemy and us and take the enemy for our own people. They regard as friends the very persons whom the broad masses regard as enemies. Those with the left way of thinking magnify contradictions between ourselves and the enemy to such an extent that they take certain contradictions among the people for contradictions with the enemy and regard as counter-revolutionary persons who are actually not counter-revolutionaries. Both these views are wrong. Neither can lead to the correct handling of the question of suppressing counter-revolutionaries or to a correct assessment of this work. Next quotation. Qualitatively different contradictions can only be resolved by qualitatively different methods. For instance, the contradiction between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie is resolved by the method of socialist revolution. The contradiction between the great masses of the people and the feudal system is resolved by the method of democratic revolution. The contradiction between the colonies and imperialism is resolved by the method of national revolutionary war. The contradiction between the working class and the peasant class in socialist society is resolved by the method of collectivization and mechanization in agriculture. Contradiction within the Communist Party is resolved by the method of criticism and self-criticism. The contradiction between society and nature is resolved by the method of developing the productive forces. The principle of using different methods to resolve different contradictions is one that Marxist-Leninists must strictly observe. Next quotation. Since they are different in nature, the contradictions between us and the enemy and the contradictions among people must be resolved by different methods. To put it briefly, the former is a matter of drawing a clear distinction between us and the enemy, and the latter a matter of drawing a clear distinction between right and wrong. It is, of course, true that the distinction between the enemy and us is also a matter of right and wrong. For example, the question of who is in the right, we or the domestic and foreign reactionaries, the imperialists, the feudalistic and bureaucrat capitalists, is also a matter of right and wrong, but it is in a different category from the questions of right and wrong among the people. Next quotation. The only way to settle questions of an ideological nature or controversial issues among the people is by the democratic method, the method of discussion, of criticism, of persuasion and education, and not by the method of coercion or repression. To be able to carry on the reduction and studies effectively and to arrange their lives properly, the people want their government and those in charge of production and of cultural and educational organizations to issue appropriate orders of an obligatory nature. It is common sense that the maintenance of public order would be impossible without such administrative regulations. Administrative orders and the method of persuasion and education complement each other in resolving contradictions among the people. Even administrative regulations and the maintenance of public order must be accompanied by persuasion and education, for in many cases regulations alone will not work. Next quotation. Inevitably, the bourgeoisie and petty bourgeoisie will give expression to their own ideologies. Inevitably, they will stubbornly express themselves on political and ideological questions by every possible means. You cannot expect them to do otherwise. We should not use the method of suppression and prevent them from expressing themselves, but should allow them to do so, and at the same time argue with them and direct appropriate criticism at them. We must undoubtedly criticize wrong ideas of every description. It certainly would not be right to refrain from criticism. Look on while wrong ideas spread unchecked and allow them to monopolize the field. Mistakes must be criticized and poisonous weeds fought wherever they crop up. However, such criticism should not be dogmatic, and the metaphysical method should not be used, but efforts should be made to apply the dialectical method. What is needed is scientific analysis and convincing argument. Okay, I'll proceed with the rest of this in the second video. Thanks for listening.